If your marriage has been going through a rough patch with lots of arguments and fights overall, but lately you've noticed your wife has stopped arguing with you, no more blow-ups or tension-filled conversations, and you're thinking, this is great, we finally have some peace, you may be in more trouble than you think. I'm not telling you to create more fights, but if she used to push back and now she doesn't, that is not peace. That's actually disengagement. You may be staring down emotional detachment, and that is far more dangerous to your marriage than conflict ever was. So in today's episode, I'm going to help you understand what's actually happening beneath the surface when the arguments disappear, and how to respond in a way that rebuilds safety and connection instead of accelerating the drift. First off, like I said at the top, I don't want this to be misunderstood in thinking that I'm saying go ahead and create more conflict, fight and argue with her to get her emotions engaged again. That is not what this is. A grounded leader does not argue emotionally. In fact, you don't need to argue with her at all if you understand how to show up as the masculine leader in the relationship. So I just wanted to separate that right away. Arguing is not the goal, but protest from her in various forms is a signal. When she protests with you, and by protest I mean she says stuff like, you don't listen, or I'm tired of this. If she says things like that, it means she still believes change is possible. It's not just her being irritated. I mean, she's probably irritated having to say things like that over and over again, but it's a sign of emotional investment on her end. Anger has energy inside of it. Frustration has effort inside of it. So even if she's expressing disappointment and frustration, it's because she still has hope inside. Disappointment only exists when expectations are still alive on her end. That protest from her will only start to turn into silence after repeated disappointment. It doesn't just turn into silence after one fight or a bad week. We're talking about repeated emotional experiences where she feels like nothing changes or ever will. That's when the shift in her starts to happen and silence comes into play. First, she's going to bring it up calmly, and then she's going to push harder and argues with you on things, and things escalate. And if that still doesn't create any movement in you after repeated instances, she starts to go quiet. This is where it goes off the rails, and most men get totally blindsided. Because I mentioned at the top of the video, men think we haven't fought in weeks. That is awesome. But be honest. Let me know in the comments or hit the like button if you have had consistent fights stop all of a sudden. And maybe that is good to some degree, but you have to look at the quality of the emotional climate, not just the volume being turned all the way down because there's no more arguments or fights. Is she warm and expressive with you, or is she distant and efficient with the conversations? Because calm and closed off are two totally different things. This doesn't mean that she didn't calm down, but what's really happened is she stopped believing you would respond differently at some point. Basically, she thinks you are never going to change. If every time she brings something up, she feels corrected, minimized, or misunderstood, even subtly, eventually there's enough repeated incidents where her nervous system's going to adapt to that, and she decides it is not worth her emotional energy anymore. This is why I say calm doesn't always mean safe. There's a stage in struggling marriages that gets so blended in all the uncertainty and doubt that it is easy to miss when things take a turn towards the exit for real. At first, she's going to fight for the marriage. And like I mentioned, she argues because she wants something different. But if she feels unheard long enough, she's not going to bother trying to move you anymore. That is when she goes from fighting for the marriage to starting to just manage it. She's managing her expectations and emotions. She becomes more self-contained, and internally, she may be lowering the ceiling on what she expects from you overall. So when her expectations drop, it grabs onto and pulls down the passion and vulnerability as well, along with any sense of emotional aliveness between you two. That is why it feels completely flat. So let's bring this back to you without making you feel guilty or feel shame, because that is not the point. And because the you who is going through this right now was the me who went through this for over 25% of my life. Your role in causing her emotional energy to give up happens because you are reactive instead of being regulated. It doesn't even have to mean that you're malicious and controlling, but in conversation after conversation, you just defend yourself from a position of logic instead of validating her. Like, that was me to a T. I couldn't understand why she thought a certain way, so I'd always try to present these logical points. So if she tells you you never listen, you're going to defend and say, that's not true, I do listen. But what she is saying is you're not validating her emotions. Instead, you keep trying to explain your intentions to curb any misunderstanding on her end instead of just acknowledging her emotional experience. And when arguing doesn't create the change, silence becomes the safer option for her. And that is why leadership matters so much on your end. It doesn't mean you're dominating the conversation or trying to stack up winning points as a leader. That's not what it is. But you need to be emotionally stable enough that she feels heard without destabilizing you in the process. This is why I say that indifference is the real threat. If she can't feel heard without you becoming a loose cannon or trying to get your point across repeatedly, it's going to push her to a point where there is no more emotional attachment to the conversations. If she's emotional, there's still going to be a connection somewhere in the system. But as soon as it's festered long enough where she keeps getting the same results happening, she becomes neutral, flat, and completely detached. That's when she's going to start directing her emotional energy elsewhere, into her work or friends, or just focusing on the kids if you have them, or even just into her own private world. And you don't really notice because right away you're just thinking there's less friction happening, so at least you feel some relief in that area. Don't get this mixed up. If there were tons of arguments and now there is just indifference and neutrality, you have to turn that around immediately. Re-engaging someone the right way emotionally who is angry is far easier than trying to re-engage someone who is indifferent. It's not impossible, but it is far more challenging when she becomes indifferent. But Jeff, if you are telling me once she gets to that indifference stage, that is like DEFCON 1 in terms of emotional detachment, and it's the highest risk stage of divorce becoming real, then how do I create emotional movement in her for reconnection? Okay, so I have to say it one more time because I really don't want you to watch this and then go create fights and arguments to get her emotions engaged. And when that doesn't work, come back to my comment section and just ream me out in the comments. Do not stir the pot or test her to see if she reacts to you by generating conflict. What I'm telling you though is this: your goal is not the absence of conflict. Yes, that is nice and we want absence of conflict in a positive way, but your overall goal is emotional engagement from her. And the most impactful way to get engagement from her is to have a strong leader presence. That means when she does push back, you don't get defensive. You have to stay grounded and validate what is valid, which are her feelings, and calmly clarify when you have to. Don't assume what she is meaning or saying and respond out of that in a defense-based fashion based on that assumption you made. This is something I was horrible at. I would assume what somebody was meaning because I wasn't really understanding what her emotions were coming from. I thought that doesn't sound logical to me, so I was always assuming where they were coming from, and then I would start my defense-based rant based on that. And it always got me the same thing. So I am well versed in that, and it is a horrible way to go. Another key is that you have to be able to hold your own boundaries without creating escalation and not punishing her for expressing frustration and her emotions. The idea is to get the relationship to a point where it is one that is alive. But alive does not mean chaotic with lots of fights. It just means one that is emotionally responsive where both of you can bring tension to the surface without fear that it's going to explode because she's allowed to express her feelings and you're able to validate those feelings. And one big point is validation doesn't necessarily mean you agree with what she's saying, but you have to validate her emotional experience. We should all strive to have peace in our lives and relationships. That is the best way to live, and that is like the way I live. I don't have any drama. I nip it in the bud. I don't deal with any of that. But in the case where you are having lots of issues and fights and then suddenly things go silent, that is not the kind of peace you are looking for. That peace is a facade. The real goal, like I said, is the engagement of her emotions, and that has to start with your identity as a leader. If she's quiet right now, you have to ask yourself, does she still believe that bringing things up will matter? Does she still believe you can lead change? And does she still believe her voice influences the direction of the marriage? Because if she doesn't, silence makes sense. And this is where I said your identity as a leader is the most important. If this is hitting you, like if this is making you realize that maybe you misread the silence in your marriage, then you need structure because white knuckling your way through this stage is not going to work. You have to understand the emotional mechanics underneath it. So if you want to go deeper and understand those emotional mechanics and how emotional leadership actually works inside a struggling marriage, and also how to rebuild engagement without escalating things or pushing her away further, this is exactly why I put together my free Relationship Rebuild Masterclass. I invite you to go watch that now so you can learn the fastest way to reconcile your relationship and become the leader your marriage truly needs. The link for that free masterclass is in the description and pinned comment below. And if this video resonated with you, hit that subscribe button and go watch this video next on why your wife doesn't feel safe with you, even if you're trying.